Now, in fairness, nuclear for baseload power and then natural gas for peaking power, it would have been convenient to have both. But had the whole of the European continent had, as an example, the same energy mix that France has now, Europe wouldn't have a problem and Putin wouldn't have very much leverage.
Now, if that's the case, and it seems to be mainstream consensus that nuclear could still be the solution, if not now, then soon down the road, is uranium still a contrarian bet right now? Would you say it is or it isn't?
I would say that uranium is a contrarian bet. It is still estimated that the total production cost of current uranium, and by total, I don't mean the AISC, I mean including cost of capital, including social rents, which is to say taxation, royalties, and fees.
Yeah.
And importantly, capitalizing and amortizing failed projects, which the industry seldom seems to want to do. If you look at the total cost to produce a pound of uranium around the world today, it hovers around $60 US per pound. So the industry makes the stuff for 60 and sells it for 52, losing $8 a pound, 125 million times a year. The fact is that any industry where the product sells for less than the cost of production, any industry that's in liquidation is almost certainly a contrarian play.
Sure.
There's also psychological elements to contrarianism, which is to say, still, when I'm on an investment podium talking about the economics of uranium, there will always be somebody in the audience who describes me as despicable scum, attempting to profit on Hiroshima, Nagasaki, Chernobyl, 3 Mile Island, and Fukushima.
Sure.
So from a contrarian's point of view, that's lovely. The idea that the sector is hated means almost certainly that the sector is cheap. And I continue to believe that relative to its utility, sector is cheap. The sector, uranium, is cheap. What really attracts me, though, to uranium now, Jay, is my then protege, now peer, Steve Sugarroot, once said that you need to find a sector that is cheap and unloved, but on the rebound. The time value of money mattered. If you were 6 years too early at a 10% discount, you weren't early, you were wrong. Yeah. And I would suggest to you that the exciting thing about uranium is that it is cheap, it is unloved, but it's already bottomed and is on the way up. The time for uranium has been in the future for a very long time, but I would suggest to you, Jay, that the future is 2022 and 2023, rather than some distant future.
You're right, because whenever, at my events, for example, whenever we've hosted anything uranium focused over the last 8 years, at least in my memory, the attendance to those sessions has been disproportionately strong. Uranium bulls are incredibly loyal, and there always seemed to be a uranium bull market just around the corner. Like it was just, you could taste it, but it never quite arrived. Maybe things are different now, given, I guess, the pressure, right, and the leverage that Russia is able to play right now. You've mentioned a couple of times, I think 1 in 5 homes in the United States are powered by nuclear. That's correct?
No, that's close.
Okay.
20% of the baseload power in the United States is nuclear.
Got it.
Yeah. Probably 85% of the homes, 20% of the baseload, and 13% of total electricity consumption in the United States is nuclear.
Right.
But the number of homes served is much, much, much larger.
Interesting.
I mean, pretty clearly in the United States, as elsewhere, they say that a 3% discrepancy, that is to say a 3% plurality between capacity and demand, is enough to give you a brownout. California will have brownouts today and tonight. If the price of uranium doesn't go up to the cost of production, and you take away 13% of total energy supply in the United States, 20% of baseload supply, you turn the lights out.
Yeah.
Simply, you turn the lights out. And when people who want to understand the gross economics of uranium come to understand that over 5 or 6 years, the price of uranium has to return to a level that allows producers to earn their cost of capital, or the lights go out. If you ask them what's more probable? Obviously, they think that the price of uranium has to go up, and that's my case.
So what is the big change if you say that 2022, 2023 is now the future? This is the rebound. What is the big shift that's different from 4 or 5 years ago?
4 things: timely energy security, the fact that the Russian adventure in Ukraine and the increasing nationalization of resource supply chains has meant that nations and societies are more concerned than they have been for 30 years about energy security. And uranium is the most secure fuel of all. It's the most energy dense fuel in the world. There is no way that a country like Korea or Japan or Taiwan could store enough coal or liquefied natural gas on their own shores to supply them energy security, but uranium can. So the first is political concern about supply. The second is that there's an increasing technical realization around the world that uranium is in some senses a green fuel. There has been a redemption in the mind of many people, but particularly in the mind of the people in Japan, where 4 years ago, 21% of the population favored restarting their nuclear fleet, and now 61% of the population favors restarting the nuclear fleet. The former co-founder of Greenpeace has come out solidly in favor of nuclear energy as a way to combat, greenhouse gases.
Yes.
The third thing that happened is that my former employer, Sprott Inc., with the Sprott Physical Uranium Trust, tightened up the spot market. That's now 55 million pounds of physical uranium that are out of the spot market, which went a very long way to tightening up the oversupply in the spot market. But the most important in the very near term, Jay, has been the pace of Japanese restarts. I've stood at your podium for several years saying that the uranium market will change markedly when the Japanese nuclear reactor fleet starts up. The Chinese construction impacts demand 5 years from now, 6 years from now, 10 years from now. The restart of the Japanese nuclear fleet impacts demand right now, and it impacts demand in a market where 55 million pounds have been taken out of the market. Extremely important.
Okay, and can you elaborate on that 55 million pounds for me?
Yeah, the 55 million pounds that came out went to the Sprott Physical Uranium Trust.
That's it. Okay.
There was a substantial plurality of inventory after the Fukushima shutdown. The Japanese electric industry consumed between 20 and 25 million pounds of uranium a year. And that consumption went to consumption heaven after Fukushima.
Yeah.
And it just built up and built up and built up and built up and built up in the spot market. It's important to note that in the post-Fukushima years, demand for uranium has increased to the point where even before Japanese restarts, the worldwide nuclear generating industry was utilizing more uranium than they had prior to the Japanese shutdown. So the Japanese shutdown, in one sense now, the Japanese restart is icing on the cake. What's important is that it's timely icing on the cake. It isn't icing that we get to eat 5 or 6 years from now. It's icing that we get to eat in 2022 and 2023.